Thanks very much indeed, Cathaoirleach. So just to and thanks the Minister for his response and for my colleagues who are on the Budgetary Oversight Committee for their contributions. So just to maybe emphasise some of the points again, Minister, just to remind your Minister that he hasn't responded to the Budgetary Oversight Committee report, and the committee looks forward to his response to that and that of his department. And I note what you were saying in relation to the organic nature of budgeting, and it was speaking to the paragraph in my own speech where I was reflecting the disappointment of the Budgetary Oversight Committee in the fact that the Minister hadn't provided an equality budgeting statement in his budget speech. He has made a commitment to do it in 2020, and just your own remarks about the amount of work that's going on in the background in relation to gender budgeting and trying to deal with gender budgeting issues within each department. That would have made it even more incumbent for the Minister to include, even as a gesture, a more comprehensive gender budgeting statement within his Budget 2019 presentation. So, again, he hasn't responded to the Budgetary Oversight Committee on that. Just in relation to Deputy Burton, and I don't want to labour the issue because my colleagues have made the point, it was just about her remark about technical language. I mean, I think one of the clearest points I made in my own contribution was that as a female Minister for Social Protection, it was she that introduced, wittingly or unwittingly, pensions legislation and measures that were particularly gender biased and penalised proportionately significantly more women and some men in 2012. And again, to call on the Minister as recommended by the Budgetary Oversight Committee, this is really important because this is the experience that we garnered from the Scottish Parliament. To call on the Minister to initiate a report into the economic role of women in Irish society, I think that's a really important message to be delivered from the Budgetary Oversight Committee. And under the heading, Cathaoirleach, if I may, the heading of, look, sure, while we're at it, because the Budgetary Oversight Committee only gets, this is our first opportunity to come before you in relation to the report. I think my colleagues wouldn't forgive me if we didn't raise some general issues in relation not to individual measures in the budget, but I suppose, if I was to put it this way, one of the criticisms levelled at politicians and office holders during the crash and after the crash and in the middle of the crash was that advices by eminent organisations or eminent individuals weren't heeded in advance of the crash, or certainly in the lead up to the height of the crash. So since last April, we would have been given, through the various witnesses that came before the Budgetary Oversight, all of them eminent, whether it was the number of visits to the committee by the Chairman of the Fiscal Advisory Council, we had the SRI, and we had many, many more stakeholders. And even as far back as April this year, it was very clear the themes that were emerging that were going to be key themes around the budget, and they were Ireland's vulnerability to corporation tax, the importance of taking some steps because of our climate change obligations in relation to the area of carbon tax, and that also included the equalisation around diesel and petrol measures, and Brexit budget measures as well. And really all 4 or 5 of those measures were pretty fudged in the budget and weren't dealt with in any kind of significant way. Some of them were put off for another year, things like measures around carbon tax. So I'm talking as a member of the Budgetary Oversight Committee. These were issues that were highlighted again and again and again and again. Vulnerability around, as I said, corporation tax, the importance not to continue to depend on it, to remember the consequences of our overdependence in previous times, and yet significant steps weren't taken in relation to this. In relation to the Rainy Day Fund, the Minister and the Government hasn't come back to the Budgetary Oversight, for example, with concrete proposals in relation to how it's going to be used, whether it's going to be used as a counter-cyclical tool or as a contingency fund, or whether it's going to be used as an economic buffer. not to mention then, the overrun in the health budget. Aside from giving some indication that the Minister for Finance is going to meet with the Minister for Health 3 or 4 times a year to try and keep tabs on the health budget, there's no particular structure or details or information given to the budgetary oversight in relation to how the Minister and his department intends to control spending in the Department of Health, because successive Ministers for Health have failed to do this over a period of 20 years. Again, as I said, corporation tax and the budget 2019 windfall. This is particularly important, and I haven't run this by the committee, but I know they will share this, because we would have. The Minister was very good to come before us on a number of occasions, but the corporation tax and budget 2019 windfall of corporation tax, which really was entirely predictable because it arose out of a technical accounting change, and we know that such a windfall won't occur again. But the Budgetary Oversight Committee would be very concerned that the discovery of such a windfall at such a late hour in the budgetary cycle afforded the Budgetary Oversight Committee no opportunity for either scrutiny of the windfall figures or an opportunity to interrogate the manner in which the corporation tax windfall would be utilised on behalf of society or on behalf of the economy. So there are a couple of points I think I wouldn't be forgiven if I didn't make because of the opportunity that arose, and also to inform the Minister, the officials and his Minister of State might pass on that, we won't be letting any of these issues go in the run-up between now and Christmas. These are issues that we're very exercised about. Each one of them is particularly important in terms. There's no point in having a Budgetary Oversight Committee that meets. Its last meeting is a week or 2 weeks before the budget, and then the night before the budget $1 billion is discovered, and the Budgetary Oversight Committee has absolutely no input or oversight into that. So in conclusion, the committee is committed to its work and continue to progress, promote and monitor the integration of gender budgeting and other gender equality measures into the annual budgetary process. And the committee believes that by having the tools available to analyse the impact of different budget options in future, we can hopefully try to avoid policy decisions which have an adverse impact on women and other people who are on the margins of society. Thanks, Cahir.